Take a few steps. Got it. Now it's on. All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 prakim. Rambam, Hilchos Psulei Hamukudashim, Prakim Hey, Vav, and Zayin. We are beginning today with Perek Hey. Perek Hey is going to really continue with the sugya of the Chatois Hamesois. However, yesterday we were learning about what happens with the animal itself. Now, Perek Hey will begin. What are we to do with money that was set aside for a chatos? Same concept. And after the money was set aside for a chatos, the Baal HaKarban passes away, Lamashal. And as we will see, basically the same that's done with the animal, the same is done with the money. In other words, the animal has to be left to die. The money has to be thrown into the Yam HaMelech. Now, a big part of Perek Hey will be dealing with what to do if there is leftover money that was designated for a chatos. Leftover money designated for an asham, that's called moisar. Moisar minachos. And moisar of all the other karbanos. And we have to deal with this question from different angles. As we will see, Perek Hey has 13 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph, says the Rambam. Hamafrish ma'ois lachatosik. A person violated something for which the chayv chatos, they set aside money for their chatos, and now the Baal HaKarban passed away. And as we said yesterday, that since death in itself brings about atonement, chatos can only be brought if atonement is needed. There isn't a donated karban chatos. So normally you would say, if not for the chatos, okay, use the money for an oilas tzibur. But since Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu no, that the chatos once designated for a chatos, if cannot be used for a chatos, have to be left to die. So the same is applied to the money. So the money has to be discarded in a way that no one else can ever benefit from it, which means B'Lashon Chazal, throw it into the Dead Sea. It doesn't only mean to the Dead Sea. You can destroy the coinage to the point that no one can have any benefit from it. Same scenario, money was designated for a chatos, and the person lost the money, and the person wants to get atonement. So they ended up designating different monies or another animal, different monies that bought an animal or an animal, and the other animal was brought. And after the kapara was brought, then the nimtza hamois achar kapara, the owner found that money, he's mamish, like by the animal. The money has to be destroyed. If money was designated to buy a chatos and the money was lost, now guys, keep your heads on. And the here you didn't bring a carbon. Here you now so far separated other monies for the chatos. And prior to you using the second monies to buy the animal, you found the original money. Now you have 2 piles of money. It was found prior to the kapara. And yesterday, as the Rambam was so strong in emphasizing that we don't extend this halacha l'Moshe Sinai, here, yavi me'elu ve'elu chatos, you combine the monies together. From both of these monies, some of it, not all of it, because you have double the amount needed, you'll buy the animal. And v'hasha'ad, and there'll be moisad, there's going to be leftover money. Here, yiplul in a dava. This money is not to be destroyed. It's to be used for a carbon. What type of carbon in a dava? Right? As we keep on speaking about the Kates Hamizbeach. Halacha Gimel. Another case. Even further. A person designated money, set aside money, and the money was lost. Now, an animal was already designated. But here again, it's not that the animal was designated and brought. That was halacha aleph. Here, prior to the atonement, the original money was now found, says the Rambam. Oh, and furthermore, this new animal turns out to be a balmum. The balmum cannot be brought. So any animal that you designated for a carbon, if it becomes blemished, you sell it. The money is used to replace it. So now, since you're going to sell it, you have 2 bundles of money. So now we're back to what we learned in halacha beis. The yavi me'elu ve'elu chatos v'hasha'ad yiplul min adav. Further, halacha dal. Hifresh chatos ve'avdam. You separated not money. You separated an animal. You lost the animal. And you're not finding it. You want to get your atonement. But here, you designated monies to buy another animal, and you did not use that second monies until you found the original animal. So the first was an animal, the second is money. And now here also, when you found the original animal, it turns out that it's now blemished, it may not be brought, so you have to sell it. So here again, you have now two piles of monies that was designated to buy the one chatas, but you didn't already get the atonement. So yavi me'elu me'elu chatas, you combine the monies together. Some of each will be used for the chatas, and v'hasha'ar yiplul in nedava, and the remaining money should be used to buy a nedava carbon. Halacha hey. Now hifrish shnei siburei mo'is la'achrayis. As we already spoke yesterday, it was common people knowing that whatever they designate for a carbon might get lost. So they, from the outset, they double what's needed. It's like their insurance. Just in case I lose what's on the right, I already have designated on the left. So this guy from the outset designated two piles of money. Here, you don't combine both of them. Here, one pile of money should be used for the chatas, and the other one may be used l'nedava. Mamish, like if a person separated lechatchila two animals, la'achrayis for a chatas. Same halach. Halach above. Mafresh chatasai, person designated an animal. Oy demei chatasai, or money designated, set aside for the purchase of a chatas. While he thought that he's taka chayiv to bring a chatas, turns out that he now is privy to new information, which clarifies, which is megala, that he was never chayiv. So says that Rambam harei elu chulin, the chatos, the dmei chatos is bechlal not kodesh. V'lo niskachu. This is your classic case known as hegdish b'ta'us. Hegdish b'ta'us. It was made on a erroneous understanding of events. Now that you know what really happened, l'chatchila it's not hegdish. Right? Unlike the Ashum Toli that we learned yesterday. Hifrish tayim or dmei shtayim. Now, if a person set aside two animals or money to buy two animals, thinking that he's chayiv to bring two chatois, and now what became clarified? Not that he's not chayiv at all, that he's chayiv one, but not two. Interestingly, so one of them should be used. But over here, we don't say that the other one was betaus, because he never separated one chatos for sin A and the other chatos for sin B. It was two animals for both sins. Turns out that one of those sins he actually committed. So it's no longer in the category of hegdish betos, even though that's double the amount that he needs. Kedusha was chal on both animals, in as much as only one is a chatos. So interestingly, the other one has to be brought, but brought l'nedava. Halacha zayin. Person picks up coins in his hand. You take coinages. Or while you're gathering the coins, even though they're not yet in your hand, but you're looking at the coins that you're going to gather, you declare, Elu avi mehem chatasi. From these monies, I'm going to buy the chatas. Let's say the carbon chatas turned out to be priced at 100, and you had 105. In other words, the Rambam is giving scenarios where you might have money designated for a carbon that you will use for the carbon, but there's going to be leftover money. See, here in LA, there's not only never leftover money, adarabah, there's always not enough money. But there's such a thing, there's a certain oilam where you can have what you need and there's leftover money. So that's going to begin from here until the end of the chapter. What do you do with this leftover money? So interestingly, even though you said this, meaning all the money you had in your hand, is for my chatas, you would argue if there's leftover money, it has to at least be used for a carbon. As we just had in Halacha Vav. We don't say that. We don't say that. The leftover money is chulin. And the Rambam writes, V'chein yirah li, shehadavar kal v'chomer, if that's the case, that is spoken out by Chazal, by Achatos, then certainly that's the case by all the other karbanos. Why is it a kal v'chomer? I'll tell you why it's a kal v'chomer. Because since Chatos comes to bring an atonement, and that we learned this concept yesterday, when it comes to an atonement, people really want to get their atonement. So one would have thought that since it's for an atonement, they really meant all of the money should be used. And if not for the chatos, for something else. But we don't say that. So if lakapara shali by shal adam noikvai, we don't say all the money is consecrated, only the amount needed for that carbon. So certainly by all the other carbonos. Now Allah ches. A person separated money to buy the flour offering for a sinner, and and you use the money and you bought what was needed, right? Which is the flour and the oil. Or if you actually separated flour itself, but you designated more than what's needed, and the money also, there was more than what was needed. So there's leftover money, moisad. Not like we learned before that the moisad is chulin. Here, you have to use the leftover money to buy a carbon nadavam. Avol, however, moisad asida so'efam. Like in Allah Zayin, you said, Elu avi mayhem. From this, I'll buy my chatos. From this, I'll buy my chatos. From this means not always all of it. But in Allah Ches, you said, this is for, then all of it has to be used. Abel, however, Kohen Gadol has to bring every day what we call the chavitin. If there's anything left over, here, yirkav, it has to be left to rot. Nothing can be used with it. You know, as we will see in a moment, that only moisar chatos, moisar asham, has to go linadava. Moisar other things, once it was designated for a purpose, and you can't use it for that purpose, nothing can be done with it. Right? You bring a toida, you have to bring 40 loaves of bread. So again, so you bought flour for it, and you didn't need all of it. Or the lechem of the nazir for the 20 loaves of bread. All of these things, if there's left over, yirkavu, it has to be left to rot. What about moiser demei nesachav? So you want to bring wine. And again, you designated money for the wine. The wines come with quantities, whether it is 3 loig, 4 loig, 6 loig. You have more money than needed. So that money should fall in a dava. Because nisachim, which are in the category of kache kachem, because all of it is consumed, none of the kahanim don't have any of this wine. They have the din of a chatas and an asham. That's kache kachem, that's the word. Now we already spoke out of shkolim, shemai said shkolim chulin. Everyone gives a half a shekel. It's possible that a person has a large family, they're giving a half a shekel on behalf of every one of their family members. They had like a pile of coins, and they said, this is for the shkolim for my family. Turns out that if you count the family members, you count the coins, there's extra coins. That lechatchila was not consecrated. This will be similar to halacha zayin. Halacha 9. Moisar kinei zav. A zav has to bring 2 bird karbanes. A zava has to bring bird karbanes. A woman that gives birth on day 41 from a boy and day 81 from a girl, she has to bring, if she cannot afford the animal and the bird, she brings birds. And all chatois vashamais, that's going to be the rule now that we're saying that moisar chatas and asham. And that which halacha compares to chatas and asham will go in a davam, not yirkavu, not liyama melach, not chulin, but that has to be used for a carbon davam. Here, always moisar sen, you put in a davam. And what does nadava mean? Nadava always means that it becomes communal donation karbanos that are fully burned on the altar whenever the altar is sitting idle. Now, what happens if you again, the same concept, you have money to buy a carbon oila. A oila can be a donated carbon. Say, this money is la oila. And you bought an animal and there's leftover money. Well, unlike by a chatos, you can only bring a chatos if you sin. Only an asham if you sin. An oila you can donate. So use the leftover money to buy another carbon oila. Moisar oila, oila. Moisar shlamim. Shlamim can also be a donated carbon. If there's leftover money, so use the leftover money l'shlamim. It's not called leftover. Moisar mincha, not in the cases that we learned before. Minchas choyte. See, minchas choyte and halacha ches, you can only bring a minchas choyte if you sin. Oh no, a mincha is a mincha. Moisar pesach. as we're going to learn, and as we learned, and God willing we'll learn again, that Bechlal, Pesach, and Shlamim are from the same family, which is why if the animal designated for the Pesach was not used, it becomes a Shlamim. So if there's leftover money that you designated to buy the Korban Pesach or to buy in your shear with the Korban Pesach, it's used l'Shlamim. Moisad Nazirim should be used by a Nazir. If Moisad of one specific Nazir, then it should be left for that Nazir. Now, what that Nazir? He's not a Nazir. It means it should be used for an adava from that Nazir. Goes l'nadava. This rule, Meiser Chatos, Meiser Ashim l'nadava. Guys, another detail. That's only the Chatos Kavua, which is the normal sins for which b'mezid Kadis, the beginning of Krisus, and therefore b'shoigig you bring a Chatos Kavua from an animal. That is where we have this rule. Meiser Chatos has to be used l'nadava. A person who's chayiv karban oil v'yored. So if you remember at the end of the portion of Vayikra, you have those three sins for which the Torah gives you three options based on your financial standing. Either you have to bring an animal carbon, or you have to bring birds, or you have to bring flour. That's called the carbon oil v'yored. So over here, if you designated money to bring your animal, because when you sinned and when you became aware and when you want to do the tshuva, which includes the carbon, you were then halachically wealthy. So you designated money to buy an animal. But you didn't buy the animal. You had money for the animal. By the time you decided to actually bring the carbon, then your financial standing, God forbid, went down. You are now halachically considered an ani. An ani brings birds, maybe tachteim oif, but a guy's birds are much cheaper than animals. So you will have leftover money. This type of leftover money, you don't have to use it, Linadab. All you need to do is that the Kedusha, let's say you separated 100 coins, and the bird is only worth 50. So when it comes to finances, money, it's only worth 50. When it comes to Kedusha, we learned already by Maisres that I can take all of the Kedusha of the 100 coins and put it on the bird, even though the bird is worth substantially less. Yeah, you have to be machalal all of the money on the bird, and now you can have hana from the leftover money. In other words, the leftover money is l'chulin after you redeemed it. Same concept. You separated money to buy a bird chatas, and the person, God forbid, by the time he went to use the money, he became even poorer. Carbon oil v'yored has those three steps: animal, birds, or flour. So maybe use the money to buy the flour. You will for sure have leftover money. Here, you don't have to use the money l'nadava. Yes, you have to be mechawal the money, but then the yohana bahem. Halacha yud hifrish behema. Let's go to the carbon oil of the. So you designated an animal, and now it's blemished. Same concept. So when it's blemished, you sell it. Now you have money. When you're coming to replace it, if then the person, God forbid, becomes poorer, same idea. So he should use the money to buy a bird and redeem all them. That's it. And redeem the money on the bird, as we learned above. That is only if the animal was bought and it became blemished. But if you bought a bird, then ifsal, and the bird became disqualified, and again, this person now became even poorer, which means now he only has to bring a flour offering. Because ein lo'oif pidyon, as we learned in Isurei Mizbeach. Money that was designated for a bird could be mechulal, but the bird itself cannot be redeemed. Wow, we have to remember all these details. Many people are obligated to bring bird karbanos. They're called nests. If they designated money for their kineim, it's always either toir or b'nei yoina. Two. Even though the person was chayiv kinim, it's normally chayiv chatas and an oila. He can use all of the money just for the chatas bird, which means he'll have to then go out of pocket and add more for oila. No problem. If he wants, he can use all of the money designated for oila, because when he separated the money, he never specified what this money is for other than for kinim. Even though kinim means chatas and oila, he can use all of the money for one of these two types. And even if he said, all of this is chatasi, he says, this money is for my chatas, that money is for my oila. that statement at that time did not imbue the money with chata status, with oila status. The money is only imbued with kinin status, which allows you later to use it for any type you want. You can mix the money and buy chatas and oila. You can use all the money for a chatas, all the money for an oila, which is a thank God. When do we say that the birds are actually designated, labeled chatas and oila to the exclusion of the other? Either when you buy the bird or when the client is actually doing the avodah. And we learned to Masech Skinim, once these birds are designated for chatas and oila, oy gewalt, if they get mixed up together. And then if a bird from one group jumps into birds of the other groups, this is the most complicated, the mathematical parts in Mishnayos. And thank God, so we limit the times that the monies can be further defined as chatas or oila, which means it only remains imbued with the general kedusha of kinem, which allows you now to use it for any way you want, as long as you're buying kinem from it. Halacha yud beis lefika. Im hifresh mois lekinem stam, and the person passed away. And what did we learn above? That a chatas whose owner passed away has to be left to die. But since all of these monies can go to the oila, and an oila is brought by the heirs, gavaldik, so here there's no problem. Because they can all come as an oila. Halacha Yud Gimel, the final halacha in this pedic. Misha yemechuyev chatos, and va'amar harei olai oila. So now, if let's say a person ate chaylev, so God says you're chayiv chatos. Then the person made their own vow. Now, what are they chayiv? The chayiv two karbanos. The chayiv chatos because they sinned. The chayiv an oila because of their vow. And the hifresh mois, and all the guy said is, this is for my obligation. Now, what does that mean? Nothing. It doesn't define it yet. If he wants to bring behema oilas behema yavi. However, here's the chiddush. Here we say yelchu, the money has to be destroyed. Why does the money have to be destroyed? Because when he said Elu l'chayvasi, we in halacha have a doubt what he meant. Whenever there is a halachic doubt as to what you meant, then maybe he meant lachatos. And if he meant for achatos, then he passed away. You cannot bring it for achatos. Whenever there is something that's a suffix chatos, guys, that's an important rule. Every suffix chatos cannot be brought. So the money cannot be used. So therefore, the money has to go to Yam HaMelech. Thus, we conclude Perek Hey. And now, we are starting with Psulei HaMekudashim Perek Vav. So we're going to learn in this chapter Dinei Ta'aroivus, which constantly comes up in halach. And based on a rule that Balei Chaim are halachically considered chashuvim, and at least on a biblical level, they are not nullified. We're going to learn all different scenarios if an animal that was designated for one carbon gets mixed up with other animals. And what does that affect? It's going to be phenomenal. We're going to learn about kachim and chulin, and one type of animal of kachim into another type of animal of kachim. A lot of the halachas that we will learn will be based on the following principle that's called ein meviim kachim lebeis hapsul, which means if I have two karbanis, but one of them Hashem allows it to be eaten for longer, or to be eaten in more areas or by more types of people. The other one is more limited, right? Only for 1 day and 1 night, not for 2 days, only by male kohanim, only in the azara. You cannot say that the ones that were given more flexibility are going to be more limited. You cannot limit kachim, because when you limit kachim, what happens is that if those more limiting rules are not met, then that meat will have to be burnt. We don't want for kachim to ever get burnt. And that's going to make our whole dinner of Tarevis a lot more complex because of this klal. And then the other part of chapter 6 will be what happens if you find animals, living animals, within a certain close proximity of Yerushalayim. The presumption is that these animals were already designated for a carbon. The question is, for what carbon? What do you do with those animals? Perek Vav has 24 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph. Says the Rambam, Kol hazvachim shenesarav behem achas mechatois hameser. So we learned 2 chapters ago, and we also learned in the beginning of the previous chapter, all right, more details of certain times that achatos have to be left to die. You also have other animals in the Torah that have to be killed, like if an animal killed a human being. So that animal was called a Shoyer HaNiskel. And prior to the animal being left to die, prior to the Sanhedrin killing that animal, it got mixed in a herd, in a group of other animals. And even if the ratio is 1 in 10,000. So normally, again, guys, biblically, bittul is in majority. 1 in another 2, nullified. Then we learned bittul when the taste is involved, the 1 in 60. Then we learned by truma, the ratio of 1 in 100. Then we learned by arla, the ratio of 1 in 200. But normally there is a certain point where the prohibition is overwhelmed and nullified. Not over here, midrabanan, because balei chayim einam nidachim. So it's gavalt. So since that one animal had to be left to die, the 10,001 animals now will be left to die. It's a big loss. Lefisha balachayim chashuvim heim ve'einam betelim. But that's only a rabbinic one. And therefore, ve'im hikriv, if these animals were sacrificed, hurzam, then the animal will be accepted. We don't know which one it is. It's mixed. We don't know which one it is. Now, what hurzam is a couple of things over here. First of all, when someone didn't ask and they did it on their own, sometimes we would say, since the Torah paskin that all of them have to be left to die, so that means that they are not going to be acceptable for a carbon. They're prohibited. Many times we say that if something was set aside, it's called nitcha, you can't bring it back into the fold. That rule is never said by Balachayim. So even though the rabbis paskin, it's not nullified, but since Balei Chaim are not nidachim, since biblically it's nullified in the majority, biblically. So if you didn't ask and you took one of those animals and you said, you know what, I'm going to offer this as a carbon, and you offered it for your chatas or for your, you fulfilled your obligation. Halacha beis. Nisarif bahem echad me'isuri hamizbeach. Another case. Let me just give you an example. An animal that cannot be put on the mizbeach. What will be an example? Let me go back to the Shoyer HaNiskel. Shoyer HaNiskel means that an ox killed a person and there are 2 witnesses that told that to the Sanhedrin. Then they paskin that has to be stoned to death. There's another din. What happens if there's only 1 witness that animal killed a person? We learned this. So even though 1 witness is not enough for the Sanhedrin to paskin, the animal has to be stoned, but this is enough for God to say that cannot be brought as a carbon. So this is an animal that's uniquely asur on the mizbeach. And this animal got mixed into 10,000. No. So before we learned about a din of an animal that needed to be put to death, then all of them have to die. Here, yiru kulam, all of these animals have to be put out to the pasture until all of them get halachically blemished. All of them are going to be sold. Wow. Wow. So in other words, you had karbanos. Okay, guys, we're speaking about chatois, right? I had a carbon chatas. In my carbon chatas got mixed this animal that isurim is there. So there's one animal that was already designated as a carbon. I cannot offer it because I might be taking the wrong one. Wait for all of them to get blemished. You sell all of them. Now, all of them is your money, but one animal was already pre-designated for a chatos. So you have to use the money from one of them for your obligation. Which one? So you don't know which one. So you have to take the one in the herd that was most valuable and say, maybe the most valuable one was the one previously designated. That's pshat v'yavi v'dmei hayafa shebehem to that. So if you had an oila before, and in the oila got mixed in this isurim mizbeach, one oila, then you use the most expensive animals, redemption money to buy another oila. Okay. Now, you have to appreciate, why did you have to wait for all the animals to get blemished? Because once an animal, that's the case here, in Aleph and Beis, there was an animal that was kachim, that was already here. Kachim, an animal that's fit to go on the altar cannot be redeemed if it's not blemished. A tamim, carbon cannot be redeemed. Now let's go into Stam. There's kachim, animals that were already pre-designated to be a sacrifice, and they got mixed in with chul and karbanis. So here, you don't have to wait until it gets blemished. Let's just say there were 4 animals that you separated for an oila, You're giving a gift, 4. And there's another 4 animals that you own that were chulin. And they got mixed up together. Since the animals that were designated as an oila, they themselves must be brought prior to getting blemished. Don't wait until they get blemished. You know that 4 animals you own here. Sell it to someone else that already pledged to bring an oila. As long as they make sure that all of these animals will be used as an oila, which means for sure the original 4 will be brought on the altar. Here you don't do it until it gets blemished. Let's find someone who's obligated to bring that animal type. You understand? Doesn't matter. Now, when the kohen is bringing it, he just might not know which one is yours, which doesn't matter. Now you have 2 people. Each one is chayv to bring 4 karbanis, or you have me, I had 4. I sold it to 4 other people. Each one already is obligated to bring an oilam. So it's going to be for whoever the owner is. Works. And in other words, you don't have to wait for it to get blemished. It's gavaldik. This whole chapter is like this. 4 animals are shlamim. Let's say you own those 4, and you already designated them as shlamim. You owned another 4 that are chulin, and in your barn they all got mixed together. Fine. So you know that from the 8 animals, 4 is still chulin. Sell 4 chulin. But sell it only to someone that you know will be using the animal to buy a shlamim. And all of them will be brought for a shlamim. It is gavaldik. And v'chein ba'oila, oy ba'asham. And the beauty is, the money that you receive is chulun l'chol davar. Because you didn't sell the 8, you only sold 4. 4 were already karbanis. Beautiful. And what's the upside? You don't wait until it gets blemished. Halacha dal. Nesarei, shoyd hegdish. B'shvarim shel chayil. And again, let's just continue that it's all belonging to the same person. Now we go into details. Now, we say that if you don't remember, guys, if you remember what was the original animal, there's no problem here. You just remove it. You don't know which one was kodesh. So we always have to give the most expensive one. Maybe that was the one that was consecrated. Gadol shebekulam hegdish. Now, it doesn't mean that you get just to take out the fattest one, because maybe that was not the one. It means that this concept that you sell all of them. So which ones are you selling? If they don't have all the same price, you understand? You're selling the 4 cheapest ones. As we learned above. And now let's move to something else. Not kachim and chulin, and the Rambam does it in the middle of Dalet. This is so good. Nisarvu kachim bekachim. The kachim bekachim min b'minoi. Min b'minoi means, guys, that I was chayv and oil, you're chayv and oil. So it's the same animal type, of course. If not, people would know. But the point is, it's for the same purpose. But it's not a problem. Why is it not a problem? Because we don't need for the kohen to know who owns this animal. Even though if he has in mind the wrong owner, that's problematic. That's the first Mishnah in Zvachim. But we also learned he can bring it stam. So zeh yikrav l'shem ba'olav, zeh yikrav l'shem ba'olav. All the kohen does is he knows there are 2 people. We don't know which one owns the animal. All of the animals are going to be going for the same avodah. And whoever is the owner. Now there's another nuance. So this halacha makes so much sense. But now we learned the gavaldik thing. This is now the second time. Smicha is not essential. But we already learned that whenever smicha cannot be done, the kohanim don't accept it. Smicha means prior to the shechita, the owner has to lean with his hands on the head of the animal. Either say words of confession or say words of praise. If I don't know which is my animal, then I can't do smicha. I'm not allowed to do smicha on someone else's animal because it's called I'm making use of hegdish. If it's not a mitzvah, it's prohibited. So all of this concept, which is so gavaldik, is only the karbanis nashim, because women are not obligated to do smicha. Avol karbanis nashim, hoyel v'chalech hatzarech l'smich al reish karbanoi. Then you can't just bring it as it is. But 1 second, it's not doomed. Then there's another solution. What's the other solution? So what happens over here? And guys, this can only work by kache kalim, because by kache kachim you can't gift your kache kachim to someone else, because kache kalim we paskin is considered mamin bailam. So there's 2 animals. So I'm saying like this: if this animal is mine, if this animal is mine, I'm gifting this animal to you. And then you lean with your hands on that animal. Either this was lechatchila yours, you understand? Or, and the other guy makes a statement concerning the other animal. Either the other animal was mine, we're making an exchange if need be. That's the only way it works. Or until it gets blemished, now it's not a problem. But both of them have to get blemished. They're both sold. But here it's a little bit challenging. So let's go simple, one and one. I have an animal and you have an animal. They're both designated for a shlamim. We don't know whose is whose. Because we're men, we have a problem with smich. So they both got blemished. Now hold on. My animal, the exchange of my animal has to be used to buy me the same type of animal for a carbon. The exchange of your animal has to be used by you. One animal is worth 100, one animal is worth 80. Who's getting the 100, who's getting the 80? Everyone has to assume that their animal was the more expensive one. But you don't have 200, you only have $180. But what you have to buy new animals, each one worth 100. That $20 is out of pocket loss. Remember, we're going to have these things many times over. And kol echad b'dmei hayafa shabem sheba isamin. But they have to replace it with the value of the more expensive one. But where are you getting the money from? That money is going to go out of pocket. Halacha. Now, guys, that is simple. That's halacha dalad the simple. Now let's get some excitement over here to wake everyone up. That was easy because shlamim. What happens? Min b'she'ena minay. Now we got a huge problem. You know what, guys? I have a carbon oil. You have a carbon shlamim. Now, if you remember, some carbonis can only be male gender, female gender. We're speaking about that. Rambam is giving examples where it's possible. Shlamim, oil is only male. Shlamim can be male and female. So the case was that I designated the male animal for shlamim. Same animal type, same sheep, goat, whatever the type is. And I don't know who's the sus. Now what are you going to do? So let's say, forget about smicha. They both belong to women. In halacha dalad, it was simple. Let the kohen bring both of them and say, whoever is the owner of this, you can't do it over here for so many reasons. What are you going to do? First of all, oil is more stringent than a shlam. But what animal is fully burnt on the mizbech? Only an oil. A shlamim is not allowed to be burnt on the mizbech. You can't say, I'll be machmir. It doesn't work that way. That's the rule we said in the intro. And by the way, I'm not even talking about oil. Forget about oil. Oil is not even shaykh because what are you going to do? Which animal? Let's go asham. I know that Rambam says oil, but he wants us to think a little bit. Asham and shlamim, only the emurim are burnt. Yes, but what do you do with the rest of the meat? So by the asham, the rest of the meat can only be eaten by male kohanim for one day and one night, only in the azara. Shlamim, the rest of the meat can be eaten by men and women. It's eaten by the owners. It can be eaten in Yerushalayim for 2 days and one night. You chap. So let a guy say, okay, no problem. I'll be machmer. I'll only allow male kahanim to eat it. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to limit the permissibility because what happens if they won't finish it in 1 day and one night? Then you're going to have to burn it. But maybe it's the shlamim. The shlamim should not have been burnt. Which is my example of asham and shlamim. It's not just about them 2 days and one night. Like who's allowed to eat it? Kachem can only be eaten by zichrei kohuna. Kachem kalam are eaten by anyone, by the owners. The owners can share it. And also where can you eat it? Like we mentioned, only in the Azara or anywhere in Yerushalayim. So now you got a problem. So what do you do? The Rambam doesn't say what you do. The Rambam just writes that halacha is not like halacha dal. But now what? Both of these animals have to get blemished. Each one should be sold. Now, 1 second. One was an asham, one was a shlamim. We have to presume when we are dealing with each one that the more expensive one was the asham. So the exchange, the money for the more expensive one has to be designated for the asham. But then the shlamim, the money of the most expensive one could have been the shlamim. Same thing. But there's going to be a out-of-pocket extra expense on these two people. Which means that there's going to be an out-of-pocket loss as we had before. But now you resolved it because now each person is back with their carbon. You got your asham, I got my shlamim. Works. That money, they divide. But Rambam doesn't write that detail. It's a monetary question. Halacha zayin. saying they have to divide because if I chopped it, I'm saying there's many details. It's a Rambam is not going into the dinei moment. It's just to be aware that if I have a doubt, then we have to presume when you judge each carbon, your was the most expensive one. So the exchange has to be from that amount of money. Halacha is zayin. So let's go in the case we had above. Let's go further, guys. My animal got mixed with your animal. We knew it's complicated. But you know what we did, which is the right thing? Before we resolve the animals, I want to fulfill my pledge. Or if I'm chayv and asham, I sin. Before they get blemished, it can be that the owners designated another animal. That's Allah Chazai. Everyone already fulfilled their obligation. So now you have money. What do you do with the money? So the Rambam doesn't see. Now you understand why he doesn't say an asham. Because by an asham, it's not going to be that case. An asham you can only bring for a specific sin. So that we already learned yesterday or 2 days ago. That money will go like Kates HaMizbeach. But in cases where you can pledge such a carbon, then you'll bring another carbon of that type. Now it gets even worse. So again, each has to use the same carbon. That's what he's saying. That's general. No, oil shlamim. No, not always. That oilless nadava will be used a lot. No, it's very complicated. You just have to chazed. There's a lot of details. Now listen to this. Chatos that got mixed with the shlamim. Same thing. Chatos is kachim, 1 day and 1 night. Shlamim is kachim kalim. Ein meviem kachim lebeis hapsul. Even when they are the same animal type, because guys, chatos is female by a camera. Shlamim can be female. All of this is, if you know which one is which, there's nothing to talk about. You don't know. So now, as we learned above, but now we have this extra crease, knetch, wrinkle in English. What's pshat? What did we learn yesterday? If I decided I don't want to wait to get my atonement, I'm going to bring my own chatas. Now this has the same din of me separating one animal, me losing it. The Rambam is saying that taroivis is like losing it. Halacha l'moshe misinai, that if I already got my atonement, that animal has to be put to death. Now it's mixed with another animal. Both animals have to be put to death. Oy gewalt. Because each one is a suffix chatas. That's how we finished today's first chapter, Perek Hey. That when you have a suffix chatas, if it has to be left to die, then they have to be left to die. Amazing. Halacha nai. Chein in the sarva mois chatas l'mois asham. Money. So you buy 2 animals. And you say, wherever the money is, goes on the animal of the chatas. Wherever the money does, goes on the ash. But here again, if instead of you doing, you didn't have a rav available, no one knew what to do yet. People were not learned in this. So you said, first let me just fulfill my obligation. You ruined everything. Now all of the money has to go to Yam HaMelech. And what did we learn also? The rule that whenever a chatas is put to death by an asham, you buy money linadava, then yiplu hakoil linadava. Right? Halacha you have 2 toidas. And we didn't learn yet terumais. Tamura. You made a tamura. You have 2 animals. And you know what it is of 2 animals? Like the tamura doesn't come with the 40 loaves. So now you have 2 animals with 40 loaves of bread. And they got mixed up. Oh, it's not geferla. Because all you need to do is both of them will be offered. And the 40 loaves of bread will be weighed with both. We're going to learn that you have to weigh the loaves with the meat. You do it together. In this, and always whenever you can resolve it, you can resolve it. So now, even though you were ready until you resolved the solution, you brought another carbon toida, yiru hakoil, chipul behemum, and the yavi with mehayafa toida cheres, but mehayafa zavachacher. No, so toida can be brought as a gift. So here it's not like a chatos. So bring another one.
Can you explain the 2 things to mehayafa? I understand.
Huh?
Well, I understand this and that.
Okay, so we had a mixture of a toida and another carbon. My toida with your shlam. In the case where you can't bring them, I'll tell you, toida can only be eaten for 1 day and 1 night. Shlama can be eaten for 2 days and 1 night. So you can't be machmer. So now that you can't bring it, you have to wait until they both get blemished. 1 animal is mine, 1 animal is yours. Question is, we don't know which one is which. 1 animal is worth 100, the other animal is worth 80. So when you sell it, I get the concept. We can sell it and replace. But I have to argue the chumrah that mine was the more expensive animal. So my replenishment has to come from $100. You have to argue yours animal was the one that was worth 100. So when you reuse the money, you have to take 100. You can't take the 80. We can't go 90 to 180. Each one has to assume that their animal is the more expensive one. But I think they'll divide the money 90. Money. And everyone will out of pocket have to add the other $10. Halacha, Yudal Kodesh and Asarba Ba'el Nazir.
Had each one been worth 90, they just pick a carbon.
Oh, that's no problem. But if one of them was worth more than the other,
the same value.
they have to use all of the money of their carbon, but you don't know which animal was yours. Halacha, Yudal Kodesh and Asarba Ba'el Nazir. And Chevra Hal Kop. Now here again, they're different. It's amazing. So both of them are offered. It's amazing. Guys, they're both the same. They're both the same. They're both eaten only for one day and one night. The difference is that a toida comes with 40 loaves of bread. The Eil Nazir comes with 20 loaves of bread. Fine, no problem. I don't know which animal is mine, which animal is yours, but whoever was chayv the toida will bring 40 loaves of bread, and I'll tell the kohen, whichever one is mine, here's my, the other one will bring the 20 loaves. Now there's a problem. The problem is that there is a difference between the toida and the Eil Nazir. Who remembers the difference? By the Eil Nazir, there's a din of giving the zroya b'shelah. That's an additional part that's given to the kohen. So you really here, you will give the zroya b'shelah from both animals. You're limiting because the zroya b'shelah from the toida did not need to be eaten by zichrei kohuna. Here we say, the Gemara says that such a small amount of the animal relative, it's like 160 ratio, doesn't matter. Halacha Yud Beis. Now let's go further. A bechor that was gifted to a kohen, that was mixed with the Pesach, we really have to get moving. Oh my God. All of our gods. All of our God. Out of the Pesach. What do you do? What do you do now? So both of them, and it's very different. You know, it's so different. Guys, a Pesach can only be eaten until midnight. Bechor can be a bechor is a kache column. It belongs to the kohen after it was brought. So you have to wait until they get blemished. Once they get blemished, what's the din when they get blemished? The bechor that gets blemished is eaten. They have to be eaten with the chumrah, the animals themselves. So I want you to know like this, that when a bechor that belongs to a kohen gets blemished, he doesn't put it on the altar. But if you remember, the animal cannot be sold be'itlas. It cannot be sold in the meat market. The meat cannot be weighed. You have to still treat it with some respect. It should not be bizoin kachim. So both of them have to have that chumrah. Now, why don't you bring them? So he's saying because they cannot be eaten at the same times. Pesach can be eaten by every person. On one hand, on the other hand, only at chatzos. Bechor can be eaten for 2 days, but on the other hand, the bechor can only eat by kohen. And the ein medium kachim beis absul neim matamachid lasan. Chein aloch yud gimel meiser shenu sar b'Pesach. Meiser behema that belongs to the owner. Here also, you cannot eat them. We just said meiser is shlamim, 2 days and 1 night. Pesach only until midnight. So once it's not the same rules, you can't. You have to wait until they get blemished. Now, when they get blemished, what's unique about meiser and bechor, that since the meiser behema, when it gets blemished, the owner will have to sell it, but he cannot sell it in the meat market. All of those will go to both. That's the meaning of achlu kameiser, like the chumrah of the meiser. Habechor v'hameiser shenas arvu. Then they both can be eaten themselves b'muman. One will go to the kohen and one will go to the owners. Halacha Yudalid v'chein shar kachim shenesarvu b'bechor v'meiser. Any other of the kachim yiru achiv lemum. The meat will have the chumrah of a bechor. That meat itself cannot be sold in the meat market. Or kemeiser, whichever one is more chamur. In other words, you always have to treat the animal like the more chamur one. Halacha tezvav asham shenesarvu b'shlamim. Asham is kachim kachim. Shlam maskachim kalim afapi she'ein makrivim mishneim elo ha'ein murim. Aval abasad, they're both eaten, so you would think they're similar. They're not similar, like we just mentioned, because an asham, my friends, can be eaten for only 1 day and 1 night. A asham can only be eaten by zichrei kahuna. Shlamim, so therefore elayira achlamum. And here again, v'yavi b'dmei hayafa asham, and the other one has to use the more money to buy the shlamim. which means v'yafser amoisem beisoy. Rabbi Chaim the same thing again. The imkodem yikriv hashamay. And here, if someone prior to resolving it already fulfilled this obligation, so now the asham kol shebachatos meis v'asham yikriv l'nadava. So you already got your atonement. So now Shneim Yiplul in a Dava. Shneim Yiplul in a Dava. Interestingly, from both, because we don't know which one is which. Well, halacha tazayin. Now, everything that we learned before is theory. The Rambam wants to point out. We mentioned this. It's not even shayach. In other words, a chatas and an asham, you can never have the shayla. Never. Why not? Because a chatas not from the nasi. A chatas from a commoner. Is kizbo oiseino. Female has to be. Ashram has to be male. She'ein ashram ela b'zichrei hakavas. Beinu chachas v'negvaz on the cave. Another thing. Halacha Yud Zayin. V'chol eila masar v'machayim. When they got mixed, if someone took their carbon, then it's going to be accepted. She'ein balachayim nidachim. Because even when halacha says you have to wait until a certain thing, there are many, not all cases, there are many cases like we began today, Rabbi Chaim, in the beginning of Perek Vav, that Balachayim Einam B'Telem is only a rabbinic. So there are many times that Midoy Raisa, you have a solution. The Chachamim says don't do it. If someone did it, you don't say since they paskin not to do it, it's nitcha. Ein Balachayim Nidach. Halacha Yudches. Now the final topic of this chapter. Not the final topic, but a big part. An animal that's found, and that's what the Torah says. In the city, outside the city, until Migdal Eder. However far it is, but that's just a mushal of how many miles, or it's probably less than a mile, to each direction. The one rule is we presume that animal was a carbon. Why is it? That's the presumption. Now we got a problem, because if the animal is a chatos, then you have to leave it to die, because you know what, you have to presume that the owner who lost it bought another animal for his chatos. So it's a chatos sheneschapru ba be'olel. Even though you don't know, we learned that if there's a suffix, if it's a chatos, that has to be left to die. So if it's a female animal within the first year, which is the age of a chatos, if it's bashtayim, a bashtayim is not allowed to, oila has to be first year. You guys, you remember this? And the chatos in the first year. What can come in the second year? Shlamim, which is great. So you bring it for a shlamim. Now, guys, you don't even know who the owner is. It doesn't matter. But there's an issue. Maybe it's the Toida type of shlamim. So now you have to add the 40 loaves of bread. Matzah zachar ben shtei shanim. Here you have a doubt. Because since if this was an asham, guys, I know it could be a shlamim. That's what we said, asham and shlamim. But it could be it was the shlamim. But if it was an asham, then also, guys, if it's an asham and the owner already got atonement, then this money can go lo'oila. But the problem is you have to wait until it gets blemished. But maybe the owner did not get atonement. If the owner did not get atonement for his asham, you don't know that. By the chatas also could be he didn't, but you don't know. So therefore, there's nothing you can do with it. All right. If you know he got atonement, then tira achir b'maymun v'yiflum level and adab. Matzah zachar ben shana. What's a zachar ben shana, guys? Halkap safik oila safik shlamim. Safik oil, safik shlamim, and what's the problem? You can't do both because so and you have to use the money to buy two other animals. You bring two animals. And you say, if this animal was an oilam, now that it's blemished, so now the tamim new animal oila tachta, redeem it. The other animal, if this was a shlamim, zeh shlamim tachta. Now who pays for this? He's not writing. But that's the only way to solve it. Now he's saying that in the Sach of the Shal Tzibur, now that you did this redemption, what do? You're allowed to eat it. Even if it was a Bechor or a Meisid, they can be eaten when they're blemished. And if it was a Pesach Achar Zmani, so it's a Shlamim, which when a Shlamim gets blemished, can be eaten after you redeem it. However, ubizmanoi, maybe it was a Pesach ubizmani. No one will lose an animal. It's obviously ubizmani would mean that you found it right during Pesach, during Chalamoid. No one loses their Pesach. Maybe it was an Asham Nazir or a Metzoiro. So and then what? And then what? You cannot eat it b'mumay. That animal will have to be sold, and you have to buy money with a dava. And therefore, when you find an animal, you don't know what it is. We don't presume it's that the minority, very rare animal. Now let's continue with the same tarovais. Meats. The meats got mixed. And then he was pointing out that there's so many meats. How do you tag them? I can see this happening. So then it's already mixed now. You're not gonna. The animal was slaughtered. They have to be machar. In other words, we know we had oila. We know we had shlamim. All of the meat will have to be eaten only in the zichre kahuna. Only in the azar. The sarva of psulei hamikudashim have to be burned. Or bechol shenishchutu ba'azara. Now we got a problem. So they all have to get burned. But maybe this animal was the good one. You can't burn kacham, that is okay. So you have to wait until ta'avoid tsururasan, which normally will mean wait until it's overnighted. Now it's psurulina. And now all of the meat has to be burnt. Allah. Get the problem? Evarei oila has to be brought on the mizbeach. Evarei chatas is going to be eaten. You don't know which one is which. So you can't do neither with neither. What are you going to do? So you have to wait until all of it overnights. Either it physically gets ruined, or it's going to halachically get ruined, and then you burn it in the azara, in the place that you burn psuli hamikudashim, because both chatas and oila, as we learned, since they are kachim, when they become puzzle, they are burnt in the pyre in the azara lemizrachi shal mizbeach for psuli hamikudashim. Halachafal ever shabalim mumen shenesar ve'evri kachim. How that happened? It happened. Afilu ever be'elef evarim. You got a problem. Why is that? Because that's rabbinic law. What's the rabbinic law? That a chaticha sheruya lihischabed ba'archim, an aver is considered something. If a guest comes, they'll give him a steak. So something that has that size, whatever it's considered chashuv, is never bottled. So you got a problem. Even though you have avri kachim. But you don't know, maybe this is the one of the Bali Mumen. Bali Mumen has to be burnt. The animal has to be burnt. So all of them have to be burnt. Wait until it overnights. Now, you always have to presume that the one that you did not, where
Doesn't affect at all the carbon.
Oh, sure.
Except it because it's after it's the limbs are cut out.
Very good. It doesn't affect the atonement because it's absolutely correct. Chaticha is kachim. They got mixed with chatichas of the kachim kalem. So here again, everything is kosher, but here you have to be machman. Here you're going to bring kachim lo beis absul. You don't know which one is which. You'll have to treat all of them like the more chamur. Now here, for this to make sense, unlike halacha chaf aleph, we have to say that here we're speaking about a chaticha she'ein ru'oya l'schabed. You'll see right away. You have a chaticha shel chatas temeya that got mixed b'meya chaticha shel chatas toher. And why are we saying 100? If you remember, because since it's an ein ru'oya l'schabed, we already learned that kachim is like truma. That when you have a ratio of 100 to 1, there is bit. Dechein prusa shalachem apanim. Shenitma shenesarva prusa means a piece. It's not ru'oy. It's not a loaf. It's something that but kachim needs a ratio of 100 to 1. Shenesarva b'mei prusa shalachem apanim atar. Now we say takarei tala. And what does tala mean, guys? Now all of it. Okay, that's it. It's nullified. Halacha chavdala, the final halacha. Now, guys, here you have to make a tala because a chaticha shel chatas tameya has to be burnt. Here we're saying is you don't have to burn it. Lechem apanim shenitma may not be eaten, so you need to use bittul. The Rambam is going to write in the final halacha that if you don't need to use bittul, don't use bittul. Which will be, for example, chaticha, same case of chatas tohira that got mixed up with mei chaticha shel chulin. Now, if you wouldn't have 100, if you would not have 100, what would be the din? The din would be that since you don't know which one is which, all of it has to be eaten by zichrei kahuna. You can do the same thing over here. Because whenever there is a takana without using bittul, by kachim, we don't want to use bittul. It's not that you have to burn it. You're just going to say chulin, it can be eaten by anyone, anytime. The one that's chatos tohira can only be eaten by mel kahanim in dazara one day and one night. You're going to do that for all of it. Here we said is a loyalu. Even though you could use bittul, don't use bittul if you don't have to. Even by truma, we said if you don't have the ratio of 100 to 1, what happens? All of what you have can only be eaten by kohanim. Even though it's difficult and you have to eat a lot of it in a very small amount of time, but that's the way it is. By kachim is chashuv. Even when otherwise you could apply bittul, when there's no other alternative, whenever there is an alternative without using the din of bittul, we don't do bittul. Beautiful. And today's third final Pedic Zion. Now, yesterday we were struggling with Melika. Remember? We went back, we went forth. That's Befedish. It's a whole year. I have a tenets to forget. It's a ganze year. Kol hapsulam la'avoida shemalkum melikasam sulam. So all like Shechita, what was the first chapter in Psulei HaMikudashim, guys? That Shechita's Ksheira Bizar, even though the Makem HaShechita has to be Dafka, where it has to be, not so by Melika. That's going to be the Yisoid of the seventh chapter. We're going to learn a beautiful exception. Normally, Chatos, Safek, cannot be brought. If you have a doubt, you can't bring it. Chatos or oif is brought even if there's a doubt whether you're chayiv the chatos or not, which solves everything, and it's used the whole time. However, chatos or oif has two parts. The blood is put on the mizbeach, and if you remember, just to chazer that, oilas or oif is put on the mizbeach one time. Mitzui, the oilas ha'oif is moilikt on the higher part of the mizbeach, and after you cut both semanim, and you can even sever the head and the body by your oilas ha'oif, then the kohen would squeeze the animal, squeeze the head, and squeeze the body, and all the blood will go on the mizbeach. Chatos ha'oif has so many differences. First of all, it's done under. Second of all, v'lo yavdom. You're not allowed to sever it when you do the malika. Most importantly is that the way the dam of the chatos is put on the mizbeach is done two steps. First, they would do zrika. They would take the bird and flick it, move it. And then they would do the mitzui. And then the chatos ha'oif, whatever is left there to be eaten, would be eaten l'zichrei kohuna. Chatos ha'oif, that's coming ala safek, which is gavaldik, that you can bring it even though there's a doubt, even though you can't bring a chatos down. You can't say, if I'm not chayiv, it's a donation. There's no donation. It can only be offered the dam, but the meat has to be put. Okay. Now, halacha Pedic Zayin has 12 halachas. God be willing, we'll finish this on time, beginning with halacha. Kol apsulam la'avoida shemalko chaver befedish. Sulam la'avoida can mean, guys, a non-kohen. It can mean a kohen that's a balmum. Whoever is not qualified to do the avoida, if that person did the melika, milikasam psulam. Now comes a very important caveat. And even though we're not yet learning the dinim of Tum and Tara, but guys, remember this. A nevela normally is metama b'maga u'b'mas, a nevela of an animal. A bird has a unique din. A bird is metama, but only a nevela of an oif from a tahar species, not from a tameh species, a kosher bird type. That is nevela. That means the shechita was b'chlal, not a shechita. Not you did shechita and the animal had a treifa. Nevela, if a person eats it, then when they swallow it, they become tameh. Nivlas oif toir is matama bebeis habli. Here comes a non-kohen and he does the malika. Even though the malika disqualifies this from being a carbon, but the malika was good enough to remove this bird from the din that it's matama bebeis habli. You know what this is similar to nowadays? And we don't practice yet the dinim of Tum and Tara. But Mashiach is coming. We got to remember these dinim. When you shecht an animal, the animal is allowed to be eaten. But there's another din. When you shecht an animal, the animal is not called an avela. What happens now if you shecht an animal and the animal turns out to be treifa? They found in the lung a sircha. So the din is, even though you may not eat it, that shechita was good enough to remove the status of tumas nevela. Same thing over here. Just by a bird, it's different dinim of tumah. You don't get tummy. By touching it, you get tummy only if you swallow it. Now, you're not allowed to eat it. I know that. So aside of the issur of eating an avela, you also become tummy. Possible for kachim, but that has this unique din, Gabra, that nivlas oif tahar is metama bebeis abliya. It does remove it. No, it's the melika. Even though yibachal melika is nothing. Melika, if not for kachim, is nothing. Melika is like an avela. No, and this guy is not a kohen. Melika in the right place. Melika in the Beis Hamikdash. By a non-kosher person, the bird is pasul, but it's not metame. If Malika was done at night by a kosher kohen, and you may not do Malika at night, so the Malika is pasul. But we're speaking about removing the din of Tumah. Oi, if you had shashachat, means birds. Shashachat chulin b'fnim, you had a chulin bird. Now, a kachim bird, that shchita is nothing by kachim for a bird, but it was a chulin. But it was done inside. So again, this type of shchita, which for sure, even by a kohen cannot do shchita, has to do malika. So it's not good for the kachim. It's not good for the carbon, but it removes the tumah. Or the other case, that there was kachim bird that was malikid outside the Beis Hamikdash. Now you're not allowed to do it there. But you did malika to kachim, even though it's not a kosher carbon, but einam kinevelam. Gavaldik. Halacha beis. Malak toidim. Now what happens if you did malika? A kohen did malika. Toidim are the mature turtle doves, as we learned, only after they became yellow. But if you did malika when they were still too young, or the b'nei yoina, which have to be young, you did it after they're too old. Or a bird, even though that ain't tamus bo'oifus, ain't tamus v'zach was bo'oifus, but we learned it cannot be an animal that's missing a limb, but the wing was completely dried, or it's completely blinded, or there's a leg missing. So these are birds that are not valid. Even now, that's online. That's already different. Here, the Malika did nothing at all. What's the difference? The difference is that this invalidation did not come to be in kachim. A bird that is too old, a bird that's missing a leg, that's a psul. That's not a psul that happened in the kodesh zaklal. Kol shoya psula ba kodesh. Like for example, the concept that a non-kohen is doing the malika, that's a psul that happened ba kodesh. There is where we say, even though the malika, it's not a kosher carbon, but at least it's not an avela. It has the koyach to remove the tumas nevela. And by a bird, that means it's not matama mesabliya. But loy hoys psula ba kodesh, the psul is independent of the kodesh. It's a bird that doesn't have a leg. That means it was never valid to begin with. It's a bird that's too young or too old. Now the malika is so zero that it's mamash harezu nevela l'chol davar. It's like someone doing malika right now. If you do malika right now, it's not b'chlal anything, and the animal not only is it not allowed to be eaten, it gives off to him. Now, guys, we learned already that treifa passes any carbon lamazbeach, and indeed, many times you would not even know. Oy shemalak basakin, and malika may only be done, like we said, with your fingernail, with the kohen's hands. Oy shemalak chulin. Bafnim in halacha aleph we learned shchitas chulam bafnim, right? Sheshachat chulam bafnim. Here you did melika, that's garnished. That's mamish not. It's nothing. Or vekachim bachutz. In halacha aleph, I think is you did shchitas kachim bachutz. Here you're doing melikas kachim bachutz. Exactly. Because outside malika is nothing. Now also again, halacha dalid concerning the last statement. An animal that was sodomized, either way, active or passive, or hamuksa, designated to be an idol, or actually worshipped as an idol, or the eslan or the mechir, which God says, I don't want these things to be on my mizbeach, or an otumtum and androgenes shenim liku that did malikam. And these are psulim that happened beyond the kodesh. Another detail that when you swallow something, many times when I become tamei, just to know, if I only become tamei as a rishon, like the animal is an av, a sheretz, only a human being is aviyavos, is an av. An av normally goes down a notch. I become a rishon. If I become a rishon, guys, a rishon cannot be metama kelim. Kelim also means begadim. A rishon can be metama oichlin umashkin, even by chulin. The word of nivlas oif, the nivlas oif should have a din of an af. If I swallow it, God forbid, a side of a mallah to eat it. We don't say that I become a rishon and therefore my garments are torn. There's a chumrah there that it's metama the begadim bebeis abliya. Whoever swallows it, not only will they become a rishon, together with them will be the garments that we're wearing. Just another detail. We'll learn that. We're learning this in two svarim from now. I think after avodah comes kachim, and I think afterwards comes tahara. It doesn't take away any tumah. Even though you did it in the Beis HaMikdash, that's the point. It's not about where it happened. No, it's since you can be magdish a nirba or a muksa, if it's not kachim until a problem that came about when you did the malika, then the malika is mamish zero. But unlike, again, the first statement in Halacha Aleph, that a psulim la'avoida, that did the malika in the right place, the animal is psulei hamikdashim, but it's not nevela. Halacha kvar b'yanav ma'aseh korbanos, that chatas ha'oif differs than the oilas ha'oif, mamish the opposite of animals. By an animal, chaver let's chazer, a behemas chatas, the avoida sadam is done dafke l'mayla mechut asik. But by the bird, it's punfaker. The oila is done up. Remember, oila means up. But oila up is only for the bird. And the chatos is down and the oila is up. Now, chatos or oif, that was wrongfully done l'mayla. We also learned this yesterday, 2 days ago. So we learned that yesterday. So the matan, the arbe matanis is not essential. But l'mayla, l'mata is essential. Psula. Now, psula means bein she'asa. We're speaking about the bird now, same concept. Bein she'asa hazayasa k'maaseh chatos. You did it l'mayla. Whether you did it so far away from the chatos, because the bird was done like a chatos. In other words, a chatos, you did v'loy hivdil, you did both the hazoya and the mitzvah. You did it completely off. That's when we say it's besula. Or even if you did it k'maaseh oila. That means you only did the mitzvah. We said on oila, you only squeeze it. You don't first throw it. So you did all of the steps correct. You were yavdil. You severed the head from the body. But the problem is that you did the chatos l'mayla, even though you did it like an oila, but it was a chatos. The problem is in the wrong place. Bein or shasol l'shem oila. Bein shasol l'shem chatos, doesn't matter what your intent is. In other words, a chatos ha'oif must be done under the chut hasik. Halacha vav, same thing in the opposite. An oila ha'oif, which must be done above. If it was done under the chut hasikra, afilu. Now in oila you have to do malika. You have to do malika to both of the samanim. By a chatos you can do malika. That's below yabel, even to the roiv of one. Afilu malik simerechad lamata means you did it lamata like a chatos, and then you went and you rectified it by doing the other simon lamayla. Psula. That means you were mafdil, just for example, which is first you throw the dam and then you squeeze out the dam from the tzabot of the bird. Whatever you or guys, remember the birds, the makoim, that in itself is so essential that no matter in any scenario, oila up, remember oila is up, and therefore oilas chatos must be down. Halacha zayin. Chatos or oif has to be done down. Shemelakam lamata. You did it in the right location. But hivdil means you did it like an oila. That means that your nail went through both of the simanim to the point that you separated the head from the body. And the Torah writes by the chatos, v'lo yavdil. So you did. The Torah writes v'lo, and you did hivdil, even though you did it l'shem chatos. The head, you did the location correct. You did the location correct. The kavana was correct, but you severed the head from the body. Oy, you did it lamato, k'maisa chatos. The location is right. You did not separate the head from the body. You did first hazon, then mitzvah. Aber your kavana was l'shem oila. And that's the first Mishnah in Zvachim. That if the L'Shem Oila by Chatos and Pesach, it invalidates the carbon. Oy, you did it Lamata. Kamaisa Oila L'Shem Oila, Psula, Halacha Ches, V'chein Oila So'oif, which has to be done above. And you did it above. You did it in the right location, but you by the Oila, you can sever, you did not sever. You did not squeeze it right away. First, you threw the blood. And then you squeezed out the blood. No, that's only for a chatas. L'shem oila. Or kamaisa chat l'shem chatas. In all of these cases, psula. However, there's one exception. And not chatas to oila, but oila to chatas. If you had an oila so'oif, you had an oila, and you did it l'mayla, and you did it the avoida of an oila, which means, guys, you were mavdul the head from the body. You went through both of the simanim. You did not do hazah. You only did mitzvah. The only problem is that you had in mind l'shem chatas. That's the first Mishnah in Zvachim. Means you did an oila l'shem chatas. So the halach is that kol hazvachim shemisbuchu shaloi l'shman, they're keshedim. Ella, they're not oila l'ba'alim l'shem chayvam. L'bavat shaloi also l'ba'alim l'shem chayvam. Halacha test. Kol elu ha'ifais. Not the last one that we learned in Ches, but all of the other cases that became invalidated. Mitzui and Hazor, only Hazor. Mavdil loyhivdil, or Shina Shemam. So here we write, like we began in Halacha Aleph, even though they're puzzled, since Melika was done, like the Anan Koyin, Einam Kenivlas Oif Latome. Here also, that's why it's here. The carbon can be mamish pas. You'll have to burn it. You can't burn it on the mizbeach. But you know what? This bird was at least removed from tumas nevela. Because this again, here we have a psul that's bakoidish. Psul bakoidish. The problem is that everything was good until you did something that, as far as kachim is concerned, is not allowed. That if it became pigul, that's a classic psulam bakoidish. Means while the malika was happening, while the azor was happening, he had a mind that some later step will be done chutz lizmanum, or if it became tummy, or if it became noiser. Now noiser is kares. It's worse than nevela. Yeah, we know that. We're not, God forbid, minimizing that. If someone, God forbid, ate it, I know he's eating noiser or eating pigul, but it will not be matamen. Because that's the rule we're learning in this chapter. That's the miracle that Hashem gave us this halacha, because there's so many cases where there comes about doubts by a chatos, and you got always that you're stuck because you can't bring a chatos misafik. And the solution will always be that if you will have a halacha, sometimes many chatos lechatchila come from birds. Even if there's an option of bird or animal, halacha will sometimes say, become a halachikani. Now you're chayv to bring a bird, and now you bring a chatos oif. You could be brought chatos oif al safik nasis kimitzvasa. You do it. There's only one detail. You do it to fulfill your obligation, but it may not be eaten. After you do the avodas hadam, now he gives an example. So you have a woman. This can happen. All these dinim that we learned in the Shafik Zava. I'll tell you better, Shafik Yoledis. Yeah, I know that on day 41, day 81, they got to bring karbanis. What happens if you have a question? Like, just for example, if a woman is mapel from day 41 and on, that's when she's chayv to bring, even if it's a miscarriage, the karbanis, the kinim. If she miscarried prior to that, maya ba'alma for this. She has a doubt. And appreciate the challenge. A woman who's a yoledis, who doesn't bring her birds, can never eat kachim. So what should she do? Beautiful. She has to bring bird karbanis. So if she brings them, ala safik. However, there's no such a thing. We're speaking about a chatos. In some cases, you have an asham toli. But by the way, it's not all cases. Okay. The point is that whenever there's a doubt whether you chayv a chatos behema, you may not bring it. And the beauty is, this is all from Hashem. Chatos so'oif may be brought, and it fulfills the doubtful obligation, but the kohanim cannot eat any of it. Which we just said could be brought. But later you discover that what you were really chayiv was when I bought the bird. I bought it because I didn't know. Now I discover I'm chayiv im acheloi nimlekon noidala. If you discover prior to the malika to yasav adois, which means eat it. But if only after the malika you discovered, so you would say, but you can eat it. You can't eat it. It's a big thing. Why can't you eat it? Now I know that I was chayiv. You have to finish the hazah stam, like we mentioned by achatos. There's 2 steps. Remember, there's the hazah, and then there's the mitzvah, and it has to get burnt. 1 second. Now I know I'm chayiv. No, because since when the kohen did the malika, the kohen knew that it's a suffix, so people around knew it's a suffix. They're going to see me eating it. They won't know that I was privy to no information. People are going to think that a chatas soif can be eaten. And the final halacha, noida law, the opposite. Malika was made. Now the din is you are allowed to do the avodas hadam. If you discovered prior to the avodas hadam that you're not chayiv, you're not allowed to do the avodas hadam. Now harezuti covered, get baldik, to be continued. Punkt Shabbos. Lucky Shabbos is a